Day 1161 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 950,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,060 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 5 tanks, 14 APVs, 42 artillery, 1 air defense system, and wouldn't you know it, oil depots are back on the menu. So headed to the map where the light of freedom shone overnight, because in the early hours of this morning, Ukrainian forces struck into Russian territory. The precision UAV strikes targeted a critical oil depot in Novorossiysk, igniting a massive fire that lit up the night sky. The facility, integral to Russia's Black Sea oil logistics and naval operations, was left ablaze. With plumes of smoke visible for miles, residents reported hearing multiple explosions, with videos circulating on social media capturing the extent of the inferno. Multiple sources confirmed that Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels, or USVs, were also used in the attack, and additional reports of the use of Ukraine's own land attack Neptune missiles, no doubt under the cover of a flurry of Ukrainian UAVs. This event now surely underscores a recommencement of military attacks targeting Russian oil infrastructure, after Ukraine not partaking in such operations amid the former backdrop of the previous 30-day ceasefire on energy sites. This type of infrastructure, a key target of the AFU, which affects both economic and military assets of the Russian war machine, does have its advantages for Ukraine's re-enablement to strike such sites. There is also a strong argument that systematically striking Russia's electrified railway network would be an equally swift road to further value-added victory scenarios for Ukraine. For instance, Russia's military logistics runs almost entirely on rail, and about 70% of that network is electrified. So take down a few key substations, then the troop and supply movements stall across entire regions. No trains, no reinforcements, no supplies. Electrical railway infrastructure isn't easy to patch up either. These substations aren't just cables and poles, they rely on complex, long lead time components that can take months to replace. You knock one out, it stays out for the foreseeable future. Having said all this, it's not something that's been missed by the AFU's intelligence division, but likely a later stage approach or phase to operations, with perfect timing sometimes critical to perform many such strike maneuvers. Then headed up to Kursk, where a Ukrainian strike drone slammed into a control cab of a Russian P-15 radar. This was no ordinary drone either, but rather one of the AFU's longer-ranged UAVs, quite large, as can be seen in one of the stills here. As for the radar, no doubt a high-value asset, as these ones are designed to spot low-flying aircraft, missiles, UAVs. Therefore, taking out such a system not only blinds a section of the Russian front, but also clears the way for follow-up drone and missile strikes with far less risk. Ironically, and once again, the radar was ousted by the very thing it was designed to protect against, which is likely due to the P-15 radar being very old tech, designed in 1952 and adoption into service in 1955. With Russia for some reason having decided to conduct the most audacious of strategies in pulling out the older and older equipment to win this war with. It's a bold move. Let's see if it takes. Then headed to the main map into Donetsk, where during this morning Russian troops shelled Dobropila, Kramatorsk, Savivka, and Shikova, over 10 miles beyond the front line, with preliminary investigations showing that there was no methodical targeting to show for it at all. Then on the map, and potentially nearby, as Russians attempted to break through in the direction of said to be Konstantinivka, but may have been a water station near Pokrovsk instead. The assault did not occur in the usual morning hours, but rather after sunset, and was carried out in 3 successive waves. The result? Nearly all enemy equipment, more than 10 units in total, destroyed. Then into the Pokrovsk direction for certain. There's been early reports of about 30 Ukrainian soldiers, alongside a handful of armored vehicles, that have just gone on the offensive, aiming to reach Solonya and Vovkova from Pishan. It's not an operation that is necessarily strange or out of the blue, being common enough occurrences on this front and these days, though it does speak to the AFU's capability to perform such attacks, and counterattacks indeed, with this region regularly. Then as for the opposite angle on this front, Uspenivka, where elements of the AFU retreated from the village under FPV cover, only maintaining positions in some old farms northwest of it. At the moment, there's mixed reports, with some suggesting the Russians are still unable to enter the part of Uspenivka left by Ukrainians, as there are still many inbound FPVs for those Russian units to contend with. Also seen close by, was how Russians are once again reporting how well they were hit. They do this from time to time, stating how they're impressed that the hit from their enemies was successful. In fact, it's so remarkably common, these Russian video reports on how well the AFU is able to fire and successfully target them, that it's likely due to fresh recruits brainwashed into thinking that their army is invincible, only to be surprised when events like this occur. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned what was hit yet, so it was a 2S1 Vozdika self-propelled howitzer. Another piece of military tech or armor that was first developed in the 1950s. Russia's bold strategies know no bounds. Then headed into southern Ukraine, Zaporizhia, with more aviation strike consistency found somewhere to this front, with a pair of French-supplied AASM hammers obliterating a structure housing a Russian UAV team. Both hammers were launched by a Ukrainian MiG-29 behind the front line. Undeniable airstrike precision. Then headed across to some news now, where following Putin's latest announced, very short and unilaterally declared ceasefire from May 8th to May 10th to coincide specifically with his annual military day parade in the Moscow Square, President Zelensky responded in his nightly address to say bluntly, quote, "For some reason, everybody has to wait until May 8th and only then have a ceasefire to ensure Putin's silence." He then went on to say, essentially, there's no reason to wait until May 8th for this very acute, very short-term ceasefire beneficial only to Putin, and instead that a ceasefire must be immediate, full, and unconditional, and for at least 30 days to ensure it is secure and guaranteed. Instead, these cherry-picked, ultra-short ceasefire days, as per Putin's own command. As such, this extremely limited and therefore useless ceasefire, commanded only by Putin, serves no greater purpose for peace. What's it going to be next? Birthday ceasefires? President Zelensky also shared that back on March 11th, Ukraine responded positively to the American proposal for a ceasefire and reaffirmed this proposal. And now, in fact, it appears Ukraine may not even go for this latest bite-sized Putin-declared ceasefire, where we should probably call it Putin's Victory Day Parade ceasefire, with Ukraine meanwhile appearing to push hard, very hard, on a meaningful 30-day truce that can actually stand the test of time. Also to mention, failure for Ukraine to adhere to Putin's short-term demands on no strikes on his beloved Victory Day annual military parade could then make for a dicey situation back home in the Red Square. Meanwhile, as it relates to the US angle, this very limited truce that Putin calls for has been considered by many to be Putin's way to appease Trump and avoid tougher sanctions, with the Kremlin catching wind of the Trump administration's increasing frustration and lack of progress to be seen for the US brokering of a peace deal. Therefore, here we have it. Putin's response, proclaiming a very short and convenient one-sided set of ceasefires whenever the political landscape gets a bit out of control. All which might become the latest play in the Kremlin playbook to appear as willing to strive for real peace. Well, there's that, but also upcoming concerns of air raid sirens going off in the Red Square during this televised 9th of May parade, which would make for a very embarrassed and red-faced Putin. Ultimately, this can be seen as another Kremlin stalling tactic, where Putin has been constantly offered a complete ceasefire, followed by his refusals, only to try to patch things up with a few days here, a couple of days there, that then immediately lead back into the action on the battlefield. And that's if they're not violated by Russia in the first place. Then to the European angle, as French President Emmanuel Macron vows to ramp up pressure on Russia in the next 10 days. In a Paris Match interview on April 28th, Macron stressed unity and dissuasion, citing the recent Vatican meeting as key to shifting pressure back onto Moscow. He rejected pushing Ukraine into lopsided peace deals, criticizing concessions like recognizing Russian control of Crimea or barring Kyiv from NATO membership. Meanwhile, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy said Russia must commit to a complete and unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine, and German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius announced that Germany will continue providing military aid to Ukraine even if the US were to stop. Then to some of Russia's own televised news. Russia's own sickening televised news, where in a meeting between Putin and mothers and relatives of the fallen Russian soldiers of the SMO, where thank yous were seen to be shared all around this table meeting, as these mothers and wives of the SMO service members must be taking a decidedly Russian approach to life, thanking Putin for the sacrifices they gave themselves. And if you presume this to be a staged and propaganda-driven event, you'd be right. We all already know Putin uses actors in his fake meetings of this type with Russian citizens, but for the very few that are genuine participants, it's background checks and hand-picked and paid-off individuals from the cherry-picking services of the Kremlin itself, all as a means to create this sense of patriotic purpose and meaning inside their country towards their incredibly wasteful invasion of Ukraine. It makes my stomach turn. It's truly sickening and something that can only be put on show by a truly psychopathic or at least sociopathic mind. Then to some hardware news, but far from perfect, as a Western arms pledge to Ukraine has slipped into the swamp of bureaucratic delay. This time, it's Australia's promised shipment of 49 M1A1 Abrams tanks, still held at bay. The holdup? A freeze on military aid approvals under the Trump administration that disrupted logistic systems like the Polish hub and slowed everything down, jamming up the process and leaving the tanks gathering dust. Some are reportedly already in Poland, waiting on final clearances to move forward to an already Abrams-trained AFU. Now, for the broader freeze on military aid approvals, which has been widely seen as Trump's way of pushing both sides, especially Ukraine, it would seem, towards the negotiating table, against the backdrop of long-stalled peace talks. And it's now a situation that has turned into a geopolitical tightrope for Trump. International partners have caught wind of the bottlenecks in receiving US arms, and putting into question how they can even use them, with countries across Europe now pouring heavy investment into their own weapons industry, which may have the effect of putting the future of America's $300+ billion a year defense export market into a more uncertain future. Then headed across to a quick 5-second funny to finish up the video today. More of a meme, really, as we see more Russian material headed to the front line. A Tiger IMV here, a few trucks there, but more often than not, civilian vehicles like SUVs, vans, Lada Nivas, and something that looks like a Breaking Bad rolling meth lab. As always, Russia, nothing but class. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!